Welcome to Mr. What If, where we explore strange questions and impossible worlds. Comment where you're listening from, and share your own what if ideas below. Now, let's begin. What if Earth had rings like Saturn? If Earth suddenly developed rings like Saturn, the immediate visual impact would be breathtaking, but the consequences would be far more complex than simple aesthetics. These rings would need to form from debris, likely from a shattered moon or large asteroid, creating a band of rocky and icy particles orbiting our planet at approximately 23,000 miles above the equator. The rings would be most visible from mid-latitudes, appearing as a bright arc stretching across the sky, invisible to those living near the poles but dominating the view for anyone between 40 degrees north and south latitude. The first major consequence would be on Earth's climate system. The rings would block a significant portion of sunlight from reaching the equatorial regions, creating a permanent shadow band around the planet's middle. This would dramatically cool tropical regions while potentially warming polar areas as heat redistribution patterns change. Weather systems would be fundamentally altered as the normal temperature gradients that drive global wind patterns would be disrupted. Hurricanes and typhoons might become less frequent near the equator but more intense at the edges of the shadow zone. Agricultural systems would face immediate crisis as equatorial farming regions experience reduced sunlight, potentially causing global food shortages. Crops dependent on intense solar radiation would fail, forcing agricultural adaptation toward the poles where sunlight remains unobstructed. The global economy would need to restructure around these new climate patterns. Space travel would become significantly more dangerous and expensive. Satellites would need to navigate through the ring debris field, requiring constant course corrections and enhanced shielding. The International Space Station would need repositioning or abandonment as orbital debris increases collision risks dramatically. Launch trajectories would require complete recalculation to avoid ring particles traveling at thousands of miles per hour. The cost of space missions would multiply as spacecraft need additional protection and fuel for navigation. Communication satellites would be particularly affected, potentially disrupting global internet, GPS, and telephone systems. Navigation would require ground-based alternatives as satellite systems become unreliable. The night sky would be permanently transformed. The rings would be visible as a bright band across the heavens, changing humanity's relationship with astronomical observation. Light pollution would increase as ring particles reflect sunlight back to Earth even during nighttime hours. Astronomical research would be hampered as ground-based telescopes deal with increased sky brightness and space-based telescopes navigate debris fields. Cultural and religious impacts would be profound. Many belief systems would need to incorporate this dramatic change in Earth's appearance. Art, literature, and music would be influenced by the constant presence of rings overhead. Tourism would shift dramatically as people travel to optimal ring viewing locations. Some regions would become premier destinations for ring tourism while others, particularly near the poles, would see decreased interest. Ocean tides would be affected as the gravitational pull of ring material influences water movement, though the effect would be much smaller than lunar tidal forces. Coastal communities might experience slightly different tidal patterns requiring adaptation of fishing and shipping schedules. The rings would gradually decay over time, with particles either falling to Earth as meteor showers or being ejected into space. This process would create spectacular but dangerous meteor displays as ring material burns up in the atmosphere. Some larger pieces would reach the ground as meteorites, potentially causing damage to populated areas. Emergency response systems would need to account for increased meteorite strikes. Insurance industries would need to recalculate risks for meteorite damage. Building codes might require modifications to account for increased space debris. The psychological impact on humanity would be significant. People would need to adapt to a fundamentally different sky, which could affect mental health and circadian rhythms. Some might experience anxiety about the visible reminder of cosmic forces, while others would find inspiration in the constant celestial display. Children would grow up considering ringed skies normal, potentially affecting their perspectives on Earth's place in the universe. Scientific research would benefit from having a ring system to study firsthand. Understanding ring dynamics, particle interactions, and gravitational effects would advance rapidly. This knowledge would improve our understanding of other planetary ring systems throughout the universe. However, the immediate challenges of climate change, space navigation, and agricultural adaptation would require enormous resources and international cooperation. The formation of Earth's rings would ultimately represent one of the most significant environmental changes in human history, requiring adaptation across every aspect of civilization while providing a constant reminder of our planet's dynamic relationship with the cosmos. What if the Earth stopped rotating for 60 seconds every day? If Earth's rotation stopped for exactly 60 seconds every day at the same time, the consequences would be immediate, catastrophic, and fundamentally reshape human civilization. The physics of this scenario would create forces beyond human comprehension, as everything on Earth's surface would continue moving eastward at roughly 1,000 miles per hour at the equator while the planet itself stops rotating. The immediate effect would be devastating inertial forces. Every object not firmly anchored to bedrock would be hurled eastward at tremendous speed. Buildings, vehicles, trees, and people would be subjected to forces equivalent to being in a car crash at highway speeds every single day. The atmosphere would continue moving, creating supersonic winds that would level anything still standing. Oceans would surge eastward in massive tsunamis, flooding continents and reshaping coastlines. The first few occurrences would eliminate most surface infrastructure and kill billions of people. Skyscrapers would topple, bridges would collapse, and entire cities would be destroyed by the combination of inertial forces and atmospheric upheaval. Aircraft in flight would be particularly vulnerable, as they would suddenly face 1,000-mile-per-hour headwinds or tailwinds depending on their direction, making controlled flight impossible during the rotation halt events. The 60-second duration would be long enough to cause maximum destruction but short enough to prevent complete atmospheric redistribution. When rotation resumed, everything would experience another massive acceleration as the planet spins back up to normal speed. This double impact would ensure that anything surviving the initial rotation halt would be destroyed when rotation begins again. Within weeks, humanity would be forced to adapt to this new reality. Underground structures would become the only safe havens during the daily rotation halt periods. Subway systems, basements, and natural caves would be converted into daily shelters. Society would reorganize around precise timing, with all activity stopping minutes before each daily rotation halt. Emergency warning systems would become humanity's most critical infrastructure. The global economy would collapse as traditional commerce becomes impossible. Supply chains would be disrupted daily, making long-distance trade nearly impossible. Food distribution would break down as transportation becomes limited to the periods between rotation stops. Manufacturing would need to occur in underground facilities or be designed to withstand daily destruction and reconstruction. Agriculture would be revolutionized as surface farming becomes impossible. All food production would move to protected underground facilities or heavily reinforced structures. Livestock would need to be sheltered daily, dramatically reducing meat production. Hydroponic and aeroponic systems would become essential for survival. Communication systems would require complete overhaul. Cell towers and satellite dishes would be destroyed daily, forcing reliance on underground fiber optic networks and hardened communication systems. The Internet would need to be rebuilt around infrastructure that can survive daily catastrophic events. Social structures would adapt to the daily rhythm of destruction and survival. Communities would form around shared shelter systems. People would live in underground cities, only venturing to the surface during safe periods. Daily schedules would be dominated by preparation for the next rotation halt. Children would grow up learning to live around this deadly daily cycle. Transportation would be revolutionized. Traditional vehicles would be useless on the surface during rotation halt events. New forms of transportation would be developed for rapid movement between underground facilities. Tunneling technology would advance rapidly as underground travel becomes the only safe option. The aviation industry would collapse entirely, replaced by surface-based transportation systems designed to operate in the brief safe periods between rotation stops. Government structures would need to adapt to governing populations living primarily underground. Emergency management would become the primary function of government. International cooperation would be essential as no nation could survive this challenge alone. Military forces would be repurposed toward disaster response and infrastructure protection. Scientific research would focus entirely on understanding and potentially predicting the rotation halt pattern. If the rotation halt occurs at the same time daily, society could adapt around this schedule. If it occurs randomly, civilization would face constant uncertainty and likely collapse. Research into underground living, protective structures, and rapid construction techniques would become humanity's highest priority. Medical systems would need to handle daily mass casualties from those caught on the surface during rotation halt events. Hospitals would be built underground with rapid response capabilities. Emergency medical training would become universal as everyone would need to provide trauma care. Mental health services would be crucial as people adapt to daily existential threats. The long-term survival of humanity would depend on successful adaptation to underground living. Cities would be rebuilt below ground with sophisticated life support systems. Surface activities would be limited to brief periods of necessary work like maintenance and resource gathering. Art, culture, and entertainment would adapt to underground living spaces. The daily rotation halt would ultimately force humanity to become a primarily subterranean species, fundamentally altering our relationship with the planet's surface and requiring unprecedented cooperation and technological innovation to survive. What if time paused for everyone except you for 1 hour a day? If time froze for everyone except you for exactly 1 hour every day, you would possess the most powerful ability in human history, but the consequences would be complex and potentially devastating for both you and society. During these frozen hours, you would exist in a world where all other humans are motionless statues, all mechanical processes halt, and you alone can move and act freely. The immediate practical implications would be staggering. You could access any location, read any document, observe any private moment, and manipulate any situation without detection. Security systems would be useless as cameras record nothing during frozen time. Locked doors become meaningless obstacles when you have an hour to find keys or alternative entrances. The temptation to abuse this power would be overwhelming. You could steal money, cheat on exams, manipulate elections, or commit crimes with perfect impunity. However, the psychological burden would be enormous. You would carry the weight of knowing everyone's secrets, witnessing private moments never meant for observation, and having the power to alter lives without consent. The ethical implications would consume your thoughts as you struggle with the responsibility of this ability. Financially, you could become incredibly wealthy through stock market manipulation, lottery number acquisition, or simply taking money during frozen periods. However, unusual wealth accumulation would eventually attract attention from authorities who couldn't explain your success. You would need to be careful about how you use information gained during frozen time to avoid suspicion. The knowledge burden would be crushing as you learn information about friends, family, and strangers that you were never meant to know. You would witness affairs, hear private conversations, and see people's true behaviors when they think no one is watching. This knowledge would fundamentally alter your relationships as you struggle to interact normally with people whose secrets you know. Maintaining normal social connections would become increasingly difficult as you develop an omniscient perspective on everyone around you. Your sleep schedule would be disrupted as you effectively live 25-hour days while everyone else lives 24-hour days. This time differential would gradually put you out of sync with the world, aging slightly faster than everyone else. Over decades, this extra hour daily would add up to significant time differences, potentially affecting your lifespan and health. The isolation would be profound. During frozen hours, you would be completely alone in a world of statues. No conversation, no interaction, no companionship. This daily isolation could lead to severe psychological problems including depression, anxiety, and dissociation from reality. You might begin to view other people as less real or important since they're helpless during your frozen periods. The power could corrupt your moral compass as you become accustomed to manipulating situations and people without their knowledge. You might develop a God complex, believing you're superior to others who are helpless during your frozen hours. The temptation to play with people's lives like a puppet master would be constant. Eventually, you would need to make critical decisions about how to use this power. You could become a vigilante, preventing crimes and helping people in ways they never know about. You could gather intelligence to expose corruption or solve problems that normal people can't address. Alternatively, you could use the power for personal gain, becoming wealthy and successful through manipulation and theft. The scientific implications would be fascinating but frustrating. You couldn't share your ability with researchers because proving it would require revealing your power. You would be the only person who could study this phenomenon, but you would lack the scientific training and equipment to understand it properly. The knowledge would die with you unless you found ways to document and share your discoveries. Over time, you might develop an elaborate system for using your frozen hours productively. You could become incredibly skilled at various tasks by practicing during frozen time. You could learn languages by studying during frozen periods, though you would lack conversation practice. You could become an expert in any field by accessing libraries and research materials during frozen hours. Your productivity would be superhuman, but you would need to carefully manage how you demonstrate your abilities to avoid suspicion. The moral weight of your actions would compound over time. Every manipulation, every secret learned, every advantage gained would build a psychological burden that could become unbearable. You would need to develop strict ethical guidelines for yourself and stick to them to maintain your sanity and moral integrity. The ultimate question would be whether this power is a gift or a curse. While it offers incredible opportunities and abilities, the isolation, moral burden, and psychological stress could destroy your mental health and relationships. You would live in a world where you're simultaneously the most powerful person alive and completely alone with that power, creating a unique form of existential suffering that no one else could understand or help you bear. What if memories could be bought, sold, or stolen? If human memories became transferable commodities that could be bought, sold, or stolen, society would undergo a fundamental transformation more dramatic than any previous technological revolution. The basic mechanism would require advanced neurotechnology capable of extracting, storing, and implanting specific memories with perfect fidelity, creating a new form of human experience trading. The immediate economic implications would be staggering. A memory marketplace would emerge where experiences become valuable based on their rarity, intensity, or educational value. Memories of historical events witnessed firsthand would command enormous prices, making elderly people valuable for their irreplaceable experiences. Skills and knowledge could be purchased instantly, eliminating the need for traditional education and training. A concert pianist's muscle memory could be sold to someone who wants instant musical ability. A surgeon's procedural knowledge could be duplicated and sold to multiple buyers, instantly creating expert medical professionals. The luxury memory market would cater to wealthy individuals seeking extraordinary experiences without the risk or effort. Memories of climbing Mount Everest, swimming with sharks, or experiencing perfect love could be purchased by those who could afford them. Adventure tourism would be replaced by memory tourism, where professional experience collectors create memories specifically for sale. The black market would be even more disturbing, with stolen memories of intimate moments, traumatic experiences, or valuable trade secrets being sold illegally. Identity theft would expand to include memory theft, where criminals could steal someone's entire life experience. Victims would wake up with gaps in their memory, unable to recall important events, skills, or relationships. The psychological impact would be devastating as people struggle to determine which memories are authentically theirs. Children could have their natural learning process bypassed by purchasing adult memories and skills, fundamentally altering human development. Parents might buy memories of perfect childhoods for their children, or children might purchase memories of different parents entirely. The concept of personal growth through experience would become obsolete as any experience could be instantly acquired through purchase. Educational systems would collapse as traditional learning becomes unnecessary. Universities would be replaced by memory vendors selling decades of expertise instantly. However, the authenticity of knowledge would be questionable as memories could be fabricated or edited. Students might purchase false memories of educational achievements, making credentials meaningless. The legal system would face unprecedented challenges. Court testimony would become unreliable as witnesses might have purchased or had their memories altered. Criminal confessions would be meaningless if memories could be implanted or stolen. The concept of eyewitness testimony would be destroyed as memories could be fabricated with perfect realism. New laws would be needed to regulate memory trading, but enforcement would be nearly impossible. Identity would become fluid as people could purchase memories of different lifestyles, relationships, and experiences. The human sense of self, built on personal memory and experience, would be destabilized. People might become addicted to purchasing idealized memories while selling their authentic but painful experiences. Mental health would be severely affected as the boundary between genuine and purchased experiences blurs. Relationships would be fundamentally altered as romantic memories could be bought and sold. Someone could purchase memories of the perfect relationship while selling memories of their actual partner. Marriage would become meaningless if spouses could simply purchase memories of loving each other. The concept of genuine emotional connection would be destroyed as all feelings could be artificially acquired. Crime would evolve in terrifying ways. Corporate espionage would involve stealing memories of trade secrets from employees. Governments might steal memories from foreign diplomats or military personnel. Torture would be replaced by memory extraction, obtaining information without physical harm but with complete psychological violation. The military applications would be extensive, with soldiers purchasing combat experience and survival skills instantly. Social inequality would be extreme as the wealthy could purchase lifetimes of experience and knowledge while the poor might be forced to sell their memories for survival. Memory banks would emerge where people could mortgage their experiences for immediate cash. The poor would gradually lose their most valuable memories while the rich accumulated vast libraries of human experience. Cultural heritage would be commercialized as memories of traditional practices, historical events, and cultural knowledge are bought and sold. Indigenous communities might find their sacred memories being commercialized by outsiders. The authentic transmission of cultural knowledge through generations would be disrupted. Scientific research would be revolutionized as researchers could purchase memories of experimental procedures and discoveries. However, the scientific method would be compromised as memories could be fabricated or edited. The peer review process would become meaningless when memories of research could be false. The ultimate consequence would be the destruction of human authenticity. When any experience can be purchased and any memory can be false, the concept of genuine human experience disappears. Society would need to develop new ways to verify authentic experience and maintain human identity in a world where memories are commodities rather than personal treasures that define who we are. What if humans could instantly feel what others feel? If humans suddenly developed the ability to instantly experience the emotions of others around them, the world would be transformed by unprecedented levels of empathy and emotional chaos. This universal emotional telepathy would mean that every person within a certain radius would feel each other's joy, pain, anger, and fear simultaneously, creating a complex web of shared emotional experience. The immediate impact would be overwhelming sensory overload as people are bombarded with emotions from everyone nearby. In crowded places like cities, subways, or shopping centers, the emotional noise would be deafening. Individuals would experience dozens of different emotions simultaneously, making it impossible to distinguish their own feelings from others. Many people would suffer mental breakdown as they struggle to process the emotional experiences of hundreds of strangers. Urban areas would become uninhabitable as the concentration of people creates unbearable emotional chaos. Cities would empty as people flee to rural areas where they can experience fewer simultaneous emotions. Population density would decrease dramatically as communities reorganize around emotional comfort rather than economic opportunity. Small towns and isolated communities would become the preferred living arrangement as people seek emotional peace. The workplace would be revolutionized as employees instantly feel their colleagues' emotions. Meetings would become emotionally charged as stress, boredom, and frustration are shared among all participants. Hierarchical structures would collapse as employees feel their bosses' insecurities and fears while managers experience their workers' resentment and anxiety. Leadership would require genuine emotional intelligence as leaders cannot fake confidence when everyone feels their true emotions. Customer service would improve dramatically as service providers instantly feel customer frustration and satisfaction. However, high-stress jobs would become impossible as emotional burnout spreads instantly through teams. Healthcare workers would experience their patients' pain and fear, making medical care extremely difficult. Emergency responders would be overwhelmed by the emotional trauma of accident victims and their families. Mental health would require complete reconceptualization as traditional therapy becomes obsolete. Therapists would instantly feel their patients' emotions, making professional detachment impossible. New forms of emotional support would emerge based on shared emotional experience rather than verbal communication. However, positive emotions would also be shared, creating powerful healing communities where joy and love spread naturally. Relationships would be fundamentally altered as emotional honesty becomes unavoidable. Romantic partners would feel each other's true emotions, making deception impossible. Arguments would be resolved quickly as both parties feel each other's hurt and frustration. However, relationships would also be strained as partners experience each other's attractions to other people, momentary annoyances, and private emotional moments. Marriage would require new forms of emotional boundaries and privacy. Parenting would change dramatically as parents instantly feel their children's emotions and vice versa. Children would experience their parents' stress, love, and frustration directly, accelerating emotional development but potentially causing psychological damage. Family dynamics would be more honest but also more volatile as everyone feels everyone else's emotions. Educational systems would adapt to emotional sharing among students and teachers. Classrooms would need to maintain positive emotional environments as negative emotions spread instantly. Bullying would become impossible as bullies would immediately feel their victims' pain. However, test anxiety and academic stress would also spread, potentially affecting entire classrooms. Crime would be dramatically reduced as criminals would instantly feel their victims' fear and pain. Violence would become psychologically impossible for most people as they experience the emotional trauma they inflict. However, psychopaths who lack empathy might be unaffected by others' emotions, making them even more dangerous in a world where everyone else is emotionally vulnerable. Social movements would be more powerful as emotional experiences spread through crowds. Protests would be incredibly moving as participants feel each other's passion and conviction. However, mob mentality would also be more dangerous as negative emotions like rage and fear spread uncontrollably through groups. Entertainment would be revolutionized as audiences feel performers' emotions directly. Concerts would become emotional experiences where the artist's feelings spread through the crowd. Movies and theater would include emotional elements as actors' emotions are felt by audiences. However, performers would also be affected by audience emotions, creating complex feedback loops. Sports would change as athletes feel their opponents' emotions during competition. Team sports would benefit from instant emotional communication and shared determination. However, competitive athletes would also feel their opponents' pain and frustration, potentially reducing aggression and competitiveness. International relations would improve as diplomats and world leaders feel each other's emotions during negotiations. Understanding and empathy would increase as people experience different cultural and national perspectives emotionally. However, large international gatherings would be emotionally chaotic as different cultural approaches to emotional expression clash. The ultimate result would be a more empathetic but emotionally complex world where human connection is deeper but privacy is eliminated. Society would need to develop new emotional boundaries and coping mechanisms while benefiting from unprecedented levels of understanding and compassion. The ability to feel others' emotions would fundamentally change what it means to be human in an interconnected world. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, come back next time for another What If to ponder. Until then, stay curious.